Hello, everyone. Welcome to our SFI Biweekly briefings on Tuesdays at 2. I'm Sarah, SFI's Executive Director.
And I'm Kate, SFI's Communications Director. Today, we're going to do a deep dive on a national security issue that has a lot of us worried, the situation between Russia and Ukraine. It's been all over the news, but it's changing by the minute. So we're going to try and give a quick overview of what the heck is happening, and more importantly, why we should care as military families. So Sarah, let's get started with the big question. What is going on, and why is this such a big news item right now?
Yeah, great question, Kate. So what the heck is happening is this. Over the last couple of weeks, Russia has been sending a lot of their military troops to their border with Ukraine. Like we're talking 100,000 troops. It looks like as though they might be preparing to potentially invade Ukraine. At very least, their actions do not look normal or peaceful. Now, Russian officials keep insisting through public statements that they are not going to invade Ukraine. But at the same time, Russia has also started sending the United States and our NATO alliance demands. So, for example, Russia wants us to promise that we won't let Ukraine join the NATO alliance. They also want us to promise that we'll take away US and NATO military troops who are stationed in countries near Russia, like Poland. The big problem with that is that both of those demands are total non-starters for the US and NATO. Like we have repeatedly promised that we would never do those things. So when you're making demands that aren't realistic and you're taking aggressive action at the same time, it's hard not to take that as Russia making very real threats. Plus, most of us, I think, probably remember 2014 when Russia invaded and annexed the Crimean region of Ukraine. So there's already precedent for them taking this kind of invasive action, which is why we're all taking it very seriously and why it's such a big news item right now.
Okay, thank you for the basics. I mean, I feel like sometimes they can get lost. It's just we hear a lot about it and aren't even exactly sure how we got here. So
Totally.
Now that we have that under our belt, why does the United States care? Why are we getting involved in this situation that is far away, not near our borders? And I mean, really, why should we care about what Putin's doing and whether or not he's going into the Ukraine?
Yeah, great questions. First of all, the US is part of the NATO alliance that Russia is taunting right now. So whether or not we want to be involved, we kind of have to engage, at least in that part of the situation, and at least for now. Beyond that, I think that anyone who cares about there being peace in the world should be concerned and engaged when a country threatens to violate another country's sovereignty by invading them, because that kind of action could really destabilize the world order. Now, the deeper question is what, if anything, the US should do if Russia takes the next step and actually invades Ukraine? And that's where I think it's kind of an open question. The White House has stated that the US would not send military troops into Ukraine. And frankly, I believe that's the right answer. The situation is not, like you said, a direct security threat to our home front, to our borders at least. And military families like us don't want our loved ones sent into harm's way if they don't have to be. But there are plenty of non-military things the US can do, and I can discuss those instead if you'd like.
Yes, please. That would be really helpful. What is the United States considering to prevent Russian aggression? And so what are the potential outcomes here? And most importantly, how do we avoid military intervention?
So let me start by saying what we're doing now, and then I'll talk next about what we could do next. So for now, the US and our NATO allies are engaged in what I would call like a super involved level of diplomacy with Russia. So our Secretary of State Blinken has had several meetings with his Russian counterparts, as well as with EU officials. I want to say there's even been a meeting suggested between President Biden and President Putin. NATO is very unified in the fact that they want to try and negotiate diplomatically a peaceful solution to the situation. The one unfortunate thing about kind of the status quo is that because the situation is so volatile, US diplomats, and I think UK diplomats as well, have been asked to evacuate the Ukraine embassy for now. But high-level diplomats are still working the problem. So now let's talk about what we might do next. The actions the US might take are kind of in two categories, economic and then what I'll call military adjacent. So first, from what we've been reading, there are some additional sanctions that our government, as well as EU governments, are considering. These would be way more drastic than sanctions that we have previously levied against Russia, and they would still carry their own risks, I would just flag. The United States might also encourage European countries, especially like Germany, to reduce their consumption of Russian natural gas in order to reduce one of Russia's main cash flows. So those are like two examples of economic options the US and NATO might take. The second category is this military adjacent category. So we have seen some reporting that says the Pentagon is considering the option of surging US military troops, not to Ukraine directly, but to nearby countries where we already have bases like Poland. I want to say there's like 8,500 troops that are currently on heightened alert for just that. And then NATO itself has pledged to send Ukraine additional weapons and other military resources so that they could defend themselves. That's why it's military adjacent. It involves military things, but it doesn't involve full military involvement on the ground. Now, Kate, you asked the hardest question of them all, which is potential outcomes of the situation. And I think the reason it's so hard to know is because we don't fully understand what Russia's President Putin wants. I mean, is he serious about invading Ukraine because he wants to gain more territory? Is his end goal just to kind of destabilize Ukraine for more of his like own domestic interests, in which case invasion is one of multiple options? Right. Or is he simply trying to extract concessions from the US and NATO, in which case this whole invasion stuff could be negotiated away? We ultimately don't know yet. But regardless, it is important for our community to monitor the situation, because if the situation escalates, this could plunge US military families into another dangerous situation abroad. And I think we can all agree that that would just be awful.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely not what we want and what we need to avoid at all costs. Sort of to summarize that, or go off what Sarah was just saying, we know there's a lot going on in the world right now. Like, what else is new? But we do encourage you to continue to follow this story. And again, we know it's changing every day, but no military family wants our troops sent into harm's way. We all know all too well the impacts of a protracted military conflict. So preventing Russian aggression into a sovereign country is important to our world order. And we hope that this will be resolved through diplomacy and economic sanctions, as Sarah talked about earlier. That would obviously be the best outcome for our troops and our families.
As everyone in the audience knows, we like to end each biweekly briefing with a call to action. And this week is kind of tough because there's not like an easy bill we can point to and say, hey, call your senators about that one. At least not yet. I do know that there are some bills under consideration, so maybe TBD for the future. But for now, our call to action this week is to simply keep up with the news about Ukraine so that you are ready to advocate when something does come up. To give you a couple examples, I know I've been listening to a handful of different podcasts that have done really great jobs of explaining this complicated stuff in really simple ways. So I'm going to be putting my personal recommendations in the comments of this video.
Awesome. And if you have questions, please let us know. You can comment on the video or send us a direct message. We'll be happy to answer. And if we don't know off the top of our head, we certainly know where to find it, because we want to be a helpful resource to you as you navigate this and other current events.
Yes, 100% co-sign that. Thanks, Kate. And thanks to everyone who is tuning in. I know the news can be really scary, but I want everyone to hang in there, and we are going to be helpful as best as we can. So thank you for listening, and we hope that you'll tune back again in 2 weeks when we have the next round of updates. Thanks, folks.